Hey folks, Steve here with I don't know, I guess you'd call it a hobby commentary video. I didn't have time to try to get through another turn of the Dark Valley, so I figured I'd just sit down and do a recording of a video quickly here on my computer for you guys. And the topic of this video, as the title maybe had given you the preview, is that I want to talk about wargaming in terms of miniatures versus boxed wargames, and just as a warning, I'm gonna be potentially trying to butcher some sacred cows in this video, I guess. So let me just say up front, if you're really into miniature wargaming, my intention in here is not to tell you that you're having bad fun, that the kind of fun that you like to have is wrong, or anything like that. This is just from a personal perspective as I try to approach, exploring history via gaming and wargaming and what that means to me. And I guess I want to start off this sort of, informal essay on the subject by calling attention to this YouTube channel called Little Wars TV. They are a YouTube channel that focuses on miniature wargaming. They have this introducing the channel, and they say it right here, right? That they're really concerned with the hobby of historical wargaming with miniature armies. Now, to their credit, they also look at other stuff here. You can see some of their videos. They review pub battles. They review the C3I Gettysburg game that Mark Herman did. And there's other stuff in here. There's a lot of cool content. The majority of their content is centered around miniature wargaming. And something that makes me think about that is, like they recently did a video on women playing war games. And of course, everything that they were talking about in this video here was really centered around miniature wargaming. And in fact, sometimes when I talk to folks outside the hobby, or maybe in the outer orbit of the hobby, that I'm meeting for the first time or something via non-hobby means, like a Facebook group or a friend of a friend, if I say wargaming, to them that means miniature gaming, miniature wargaming specifically. So if I say, oh, I'm into war games, somebody might say, oh, well, I've got a really great Napoleonic army that I have, or I have this Warhammer 40K army that I have. And what's really kind of interesting to me is that, like, I understand that folks enjoy both. There are folks out there that enjoy both, but there just seems to be, if you're really into miniature wargaming, that's what you do. And if you're not, and you're into the, I guess I'll say boxed wargame, you're into that, right? And that sort of, difference between the two, or why you do one or the other, I think is such an individual thing. Obviously, if somebody's into one, they might not be into the other, vice versa, whatever. And excuse me, I'm like coughing on mute here because I'm still getting over being sick. So something I want to try to explore is, like, well, why do I, Steve, value boxed war games over miniature war games? Because at the end of the day, while I've been adjacent to miniature wargaming for a long time, I really just stay away from it. It just, to me, is not a valuable hobby to pursue, because the net, ratio of fun to dollars spent is so steep as to be, I don't know, wasteful, I guess. I don't know. So I want to show some comparisons just to set the frame here, right? Because if you're new to wargaming entirely, this might be an interesting thing to look at and to talk about. And if you're old hat at boxed wargaming or miniature wargaming, maybe this is interesting perspective for you. And if you have thoughts that you'd like to share in the comments section below, please do. I'm open to the conversation. I watch a lot of YouTube. I have a lot of folks that I watch, and Little Wars is just one that I kind of keep my eye on. Um, so if you're interested in miniature wargaming, they might be a cool channel to check out just for that reason alone. So if I look at Warhammer 40K, right, this is for a lot of people the premier miniature wargaming franchise, or the place to be. Now, I'm primarily a historical wargaming type of person, right? I like historical games. I like history a lot. I read history books, all that fun stuff. But my other hobby that I've had in my life, that I've had longer than I've been in wargaming, has been Dungeons and Dragons, tabletop role-playing games. I don't really talk about that stuff on the channel for whatever reason, but I do have a lot of books. I've played since I was a young teenager, through college, and as an adult, I've still tried to play sometimes, but it's just hard to get a group together to do that. So like fantasy and sci-fi, all of that stuff I really appreciate, and Warhammer 40K is in that space. When it comes to Warhammer 40K, you have Games Workshop, which has its own stores, and it's all about their miniature stuff, right? When it comes to miniature wargaming, there's a couple of things that you just have, like, it's part of the investment in doing this hobby is you're going to buy the product, you're going to get your sprue cutters, you're going to cut out the pieces as needed, you're going to put together the miniatures, you're going to paint the miniature, so you got to buy paint, you might buy different styles of paint, different colors of paint, to be able to do what you want to do. And you gotta eventually, I guess, develop decent painting skills, or it's people pride themselves in their painting ability. And I knew people who, when it came to like Dungeons and Dragons, would get the pewter, the metal miniatures, and would do a fantastic job painting those for D&D. But with miniature wargaming, like, that's every piece that you're going to use to play the game. You're going to go and you're going to put together, you're going to paint, you're going to do the whole thing, right? Now, buying paint and the accompanying materials to do a good job with all of that, that's its own sort of price place to be and determine and figure out what you want to do there. But if you're looking to get into the hobby, right, you're going to maybe go to the Games Workshop website like this. You're going to use the filters over here. You say start here, right? But I'm a new guy. I want to start here. And it's going to show you 7 products. Now, a couple of things to look at here. There's getting started with Warhammer 40K, which is $8 and comes with a mini, and I'm not sure what else. It might not be very good value because you're just getting not a whole lot of stuff. But then you have these other sets, right? You can get $35 worth of stuff, which apparently gets you some paint and 3 miniatures of some sort of infantry death guard. Similarly, you can do these I'm going to guess Imperium of Man intercessors, $35. The rules, the rule book, $50, which, okay, that's okay. That's acceptable, right? In most miniature games, you need to buy the rulebook so that you can play the game, right? And that rulebook's going to cover a lot of stuff that you care about. It's going to cover it so you can just play the game, $50, initial investment. You got to do that to some degree. They also have these starter sets. So there's a $40 starter set with some stuff, basically 15 minis. I looked at this page earlier, like 15 minis, some basic terrain, and some stuff that you can use. Simplified core rules and all that stuff. $40. And you're going to play through that a couple of times maybe. But then there's the $80 set, and you get some more minis and some more terrain. That's basically the result of doubling your price. And then there's the Dark Imperium set, which is like a super starter set, which is really probably, like, if you're going to get one of these at all, you might even just want to get the Dark Imperium because it's going to give you a larger set of guys and 2 different armies of decent size, so you can have, squads battling. And this gives you, some books and the minis. It doesn't look like it comes with terrain, I guess. I don't know. 160 bucks. $160. That's, to me, that seems like a lot. Like, you're that's an investment, right? You're putting a lot of money into this. But it doesn't stop there, right? If you're going to play Warhammer 40K and you're going to go to the Game Workshop store or your local hobby store and you're going to look to play an opponent, this won't be enough. You need to get other stuff. You're going to want other stuff. Because you might even decide you don't like the way these armies play, or maybe you like one and you want to get more. So you start looking at this other stuff, right? Now I'm going to take the start here filter off. Let's just pick another army. Like, say the orcs, right? Space orcs. Well, there's this Codex Orcs book, which I guess if you're going to run an orc army, you're going to buy that, so that's another $40. And then you're going to start getting this other stuff. Start collecting orcs, okay? It's 90 bucks for an assortment of infantry guys. Do you want a armored car vehicle? That's 50 bucks. Do you want whatever this thing is, a battle wagon? Well, that's 85 bucks. Gorkanaut, that's 125 bucks. You can kind of see where I'm going with this, right? Like, you're dumping, almost the price or over the price of a starter set for one particular unit that you may not always use in your army, right? If you're playing a match against somebody and you're doing like a point, like use these many army points to put together the battle armies that are going to fight, you might not even use the Gorkanaut because the values don't make sense. You can't work it out. And all of this assuming that you end up liking your orc army. Well, what if you want to do something different? What if you're getting tired of your orc army? Well, then you want to start looking at, maybe you're going to like the Tau. The Tau Empire. Well, you're going to buy the Tau book, or you're going to get this sort of combo pack for 55 bucks. You're going to have to start somewhere, maybe get this $95 set. If you want the Storm Surge Mecha, which, these guys look pretty cool, well, you're shelling out $170, $80, $55. You want a gunship, that's $60, and it balloons up, right? Now, if you're sitting here saying, Steve, I don't need all these different things, I'm only going to get whatever, and it's good, and I'm happy with my army set, I'd say that's valid, right? I try to put myself in the mindset of tabletop role-playing games, because with tabletop role-playing games, similarly, there's like an initial investment. You buy some rule books, maybe you buy a few miniatures, dice, whatever. But you don't have to spend too much money on your D&D hobby. And similarly here, if you can, draw a line around here's all I want and need, and that you don't have to buy anything more than that, maybe you spend a couple $100 and that's it, and you're never spending another thing, but I'm not sure that's how it works out all the time for people, right? And so you get used to having this army, you're just going to play this army, and you're going to play it against other people's armies, and your variance, or your sort of like value out of what you've purchased, is going to be within those confines. So it might be a lot of playability and fun for the dollar spent. It might be a little. It just, every circumstance will be different. But it seems like an awful lot to deal with. And then, if you're trying to build your own terrain, that's a whole other thing. And I know people get really extravagant with terrain and stuff. So it just, that balloons up, right? Like, and if you're somebody who makes, 7 digits a year, and you can buy anything and everything you want, hey, power to you, right? But it just seems like what you're getting and what you can operate with is just of somewhat limited value to me, it seems like, right? Now, the historical side of this is, well, you want to do something that isn't fantasy or isn't sci-fi. You want to do something historical, right? Well, Bolt Action, which is a pretty popular brand, I think, for historical miniature wargaming. I mean, the prices are pretty similar. Like, Okay, let's say I want to do a, yeah, they're interesting. There's a Spanish army. Yeah, let's say this is German Band of Brothers Bolt Action 2 starter set, $135. What does $135 get me? It gives me 36 infantry, so that's actually a pretty decent number, and one what looks like tracked armored vehicle. Yeah. Um, yeah, okay. You get some stuff. That's not bad. $135 though. $135. Um, and if you wanted to do, let's say, okay, I want to do, let's use Germany again. Africa Corps. Hook me up with some Africa Corps here. Well, you got to get, well, there's a El Alamein set of stuff. $130 basically. You got your paint sets, whatever. Africa Corps units. And then, oh, okay, here we go. We're now we're looking at actual tanks. So if you want a Panzer, Panzer II, you're spending $32, $30 for one tank. You can try to get some value out of this early tank attack force for $131. Early production Tiger, $41. Okay, right. Yeah, I mean, this should be clearly evident to folks, right? Like you have to know what you want to get the value out, right? Like if you don't think you're gonna like having a German army, you just don't even bother spending that money, right? You're gonna spend that money on the army that you want. You got to figure out what you want. You got to figure out what do you think would be fun to have, and what would be valuable to have, right? If you're gonna get into this hobby and like the people that you're gonna play against are only ever gonna have a certain like point army to battle, there's certain things it just doesn't make sense to buy at all, right? Like I'm not gonna buy a tank because the point value. I'm only going to be really fighting squad battles with my friends because that's all they purchase, that kind of thing. And it just, reminds me of an episode of Dan Carlin's Hardcore History podcast, which is a really interesting podcast that I recommend. He did a blitz, or I'm not sure what he's calling it. It was like a side episode, and he was talking about miniature wargaming, a lot of it. And he brought up this challenge that exists where if you did Ancients, which I have to wonder, is Hail Caesar their Ancients stuff? It looks like it. Say armies. Okay. You got Bronze Age armies. You've got Iron Age armies. You've got the Romans. You've got enemies of Rome. One of the things that Dan talked about in his podcast was that, like, you had the army that you got. Like, if you're into the Romans, you're going to get a Roman army. You're going to get set up to run that Roman army. Look, you can get an Imperial Roman cohort for $600. Like I could buy a generator for my house for just a little bit more than that. Okay, that gets you a lot of stuff, right? And who you could play against was like whoever had, who was playing the same system, knew the rules of whatever system, and had their own army. But if this was like, oh, here are the Romans, but unfortunately, my buddy was adamant about having a Bronze Age Akkadian Empire army, well, you could make them fight, but that's incredibly anachronistic. So it's just like, I guess this whole miniature wargaming thing, it's just like it can be very open-ended, much like a tabletop role-playing game. And tabletop role-playing games have a history with miniature wargaming. D&D originated in that vein, so it's like it makes sense, but to me, who's coming at this from a boxed wargame perspective, like this is all very nebulous and very hard to appreciate all the stuff that goes into this, just because there is so much variance that like I can't guarantee the quality of the game experience that I'm looking to have and for the money that I would be investing in it. Now, just to draw a comparison, right? And boy, I feel like my voice is going to start to go bad here, guys, so I apologize for that if it starts to happen. I think it's starting to happen. Like, comparatively, I'm just going to use GMT games as an example, but I could use Compass games, I could use a lot of other publishers, and they're all in the same vein here, right? I'm just going to use GMT because it's probably the most well-known brand. GMT Games, right, does the boxed war game, which is, I mean, to draw that line between a miniatures war game and a boxed war game, the intent is when you buy a boxed war game, assuming you're not buying an expansion, right, because an expansion is going to add more stuff to a game. If you're buying just, here's the game, you know, in theory, right, everything in the box is what you need to play the game and to experience whatever it is the game's intending for you to experience. And just using the front page of GMT as, I guess, an example of this, like, okay, here's Stalingrad 42. It's a game that's about to come out or just came out. I guess it just came out. I'm kind of debating on getting this. I just don't know. Okay, $75, right? Okay. $75 in equal terms can get me this Razor Shark Strike Fighter that I can use in this game of Warhammer 40k, and I might not always use it, but it's there, and I got it, and it looks cool. I can put it on a shelf, whatever. Or I can get Stalingrad 42. So what do I get with Stalingrad 42? Well, I get everything that I need to experience what Stalingrad 42 is trying to give me, which is an operational simulation of the Stalingrad campaign. And it's not, you know, I mean, if you were to compare this to, like, the bolt action stuff, the World War II miniatures, all of that is, like, squad, tactical level play, right? It is different, and there are tactical boxed war games. Combat Commander, I can bring that up here shortly, among others, exist to give a similar type of experience, except that, you know, instead of like buying an army or buying pieces, the game comes in a box and it gives you, in theory, everything you need to play within this defined parameter of what the game is. So here, with the Stalingrad campaign, is this huge defined map. It's going to have tons of counters representing all the different forces, and you experience this for what it is. And that's $75, and you can. That's a whole game experience that can take dozens of hours of play, dozens of hours, and you can replay it. You can try again. You can play it solitaire. You can play it opposed, one side and the other. You can even participate in competitions and tournaments for certain types of games like this. So, you know, you're not you know, when you're buying stuff for a miniatures war game, like you're buying the rulebook for that system and then you're buying your army and you're playing that game. Like you are playing Warhammer 40k. That is the game you're playing. Stalingrad 42 would be the game we're playing, and it's just $75. That's the entry cost, but that is everything that you can get for this. And again, like, okay, let's just look at Combat Commander for a second. This is just one example of many. I'm not even going to touch upon ASL because ASL is its own crazy monster to even discuss in this video, and I'm not going to bother doing it. So, like, okay, here's $80. Combat Commander, 4th printing. You're going to get 600 and some counters. You're going to get variety of different map sheets of different terrain, different types of things. You're going to get some cards. There's a card element to this one. But the game is basically your tactical World War II game. That will give you very similar, again, very similar experiences to what you might find in a miniatures game. There'll be some differences, right? That's going to come part and parcel to it all. But it will be similar. And of course, Combat Commander has expansions. You can see here that came up in the search results. There's Combat Commander Europe, which is like the main original one. There's Mediterranean for 85. There's Pacific for will be 80, potentially reduced price if you pre-order. There's also Resistance, which covers, I think, the French Resistance, maybe? I can't remember. So yeah, if like you look at this, you say, well, that's 80, 160. Like if you wanted everything, yeah, it's going to be a few $100 all put together in tax and shipping and all that stuff. But that's still, you know, not $600 for an Imperial Roman cohort, right? And I think that's what I think to me that's like when I talk about wargaming, historical wargaming, and the flexibility of it is, I have a lot of games, right? If you see in the back of, behind me in my videos, I have a great big bookshelf filled with games. What I appreciate is, and I'm just going to use GMT's all games thing here, like each game here in the list, just as an example, from one publisher, is a self-contained experience. Like playing, well, or a 2-in-1, like the 1914 Glory's End When Eagles Fight pack. But if I get a Distant Plain, I'm going to play a Distant Plain. And a Distant Plain is unique to itself. It is its own game experience that I'm getting for whatever, $80 in this case. Some of these other games can be much cheaper, right? You can get a game like the American Revolution Tri-Pack for $65, and it includes 3 different battles of the American Revolution to play out, and those are all, game experiences that you can replay and are unique to themselves for $65. If you're spending $2,000 or $3,000 on your miniature wargaming, especially if you're playing all within one system, you're basically like, this game is costing me $3,000. If you're buying huge amounts of armies or whatever, like, you're going to play this Hail Caesar, and you're going to get, an Imperial Roman cohort, and then, maybe down the road you get some additional units. That brings it up to close to $1,000, and then you do the same thing because what you really wanted was a Dark Ages army, and what you wanted was a Viking army, because you want to do some medieval battles. Evidently some things are out of stock. Similarly, spending hundreds of dollars, you're going to be in the same kind of thing, right? Like, you're playing this system, sort of working your way through the different game experiences, where, just as another example, and I feel like I'm just repeating myself now, so I apologize, guys. But if I'm like, okay, here's the Great Battles of History series, which I'm going to pull up at some point when it shows up. Here we go. Like, I'm going to get SPQR, right? That's like the latest one that's been reprinted. $105. Okay. Yeah, sure, that's pricey. And what I'm getting is 19 battles, enough counters to basically represent Roman armies of the time, and the armies that they fought, so the Carthaginians, the barbarians in Northern Europe, and beyond, basically. And it's a whole battle system that is similar in many ways to a miniatures game, but different. And you're not using miniatures, you're using counters, which, for some people may have trouble visualizing it if it's not your little guys on the, dudes on the terrain on your game table. That might not be as fulfilling as counters that are on, flat counters that are on a map. But in terms of, the fidelity of the historical experience and playing through the motions, like, this is pretty good for the value, right? I mean, to me, that, again, seems like it would be. And how you want to look at it. And nothing stops you from mixing it up a little bit, right? You say, well, okay, I've played through these 19 battles, and now I'm getting kind of bored with them because I played the 19 battles both ways. So I played the game, almost 40 times, maybe 40 times because you replayed a battle or two here or there. Okay, so you've probably spent, 120 hours. So, a buck an hour maybe, we'll say, just rounding badly. Nothing stops you from taking SPQR and, like, creating your own scenarios, or even creating manufactured scenarios using the force pool of counters that are available and working out with an opponent something that feels appropriate or fair and fighting that out. Like, there's nothing to stop you from doing that. It's just the game gives you these preset battles to go enjoy. So, I don't know. It's just very interesting to me that, there is this um, dichotomy, or there's this separation of sorts between, like, if I say wargaming, I mean boxed war games, but my buddy who might live, elsewhere, does whatever, when somebody says wargaming, he means Warhammer 40K, and maybe it comes down to your disposable income, or your interests, or what's fun to you and how do you express that fun. Maybe you really like painting miniatures, so that's just its own joy in itself, I guess. Um, to me, it just seems like for the money that I'm going to spend, I would much rather do it on boxed war games so I can get a much broader experience of historical fidelity and the different game experiences that can be offered to me. That if I'm going to spend $50 um, 1 month, let's say if my fun budget is $50 a month or every couple months, like, spending that money will round up and say, 1 month I get Twilight Struggle, and then another month down the road I get Conquest and Consequence. For that fun money that I'm spending, I'm getting very different game experiences and different, fun experiences within these box games, where if I was like, oh, well, I bought a new helicarrier thing for my miniatures game, that might not be a very dramatic amount of fun changing, on a maybe month-to-month level, whatever. So, I don't know. I don't know what my thesis statement is for this video besides, if you're new to wargaming, I would really recommend boxed wargaming instead of miniatures. Um, I may have a lot of cardboard, but I don't have as much plastic or metal laying around the house. I'd have boxes of stuff with neat little things inside and rule books and everything else. I think that's a really great way to go if you're interested in wargaming. I mean, to me, you can get a lot more for your dollar, it seems like to me. Now, if you're sitting there and you're going harumph and you really like miniature wargaming, again, like I said at the beginning of this video, my intention is not to give people a bad time about how they spend their fun. But knowing that there are these differences that exist and that they really are they almost feel like different hobbies. Because when I go to a war game convention in my local area, they're playing boxed war games. I don't think I've ever seen anyone bring historical miniatures to those conventions. Now, surely those conventions exist, or those places exist where they're played. It seems like they're played in a different venue or a different, set of contexts than the conventions that I'm going to for war games. If you're going to a local game store, you're going to find people playing miniature war games alongside people playing any old other war game or board game or whatever. But there does seem to be a distinction that is just, I don't know, just exists because the medium is different. And I just find that really fascinating. And as I look at things like Little Wars TV, like how they're doing essentially both, and they've got some really great content, even just for the miniature stuff. It's interesting to watch, even if I'm not purchasing and playing these games. Like I think the naval miniatures games just look really cool. It'd just be a lot of fun. I can't bring myself to buy any of it, but it would seem like it'd be a lot of fun. Instead of that, I'm going to get something like, what's it called? It's in P500 somewhere. Now I'm rambling. It's in here somewhere. Here we go. Flying Colors. I'm going to get Flying Colors instead. Where, yeah, I don't have nice, cool-looking, little boats that I can put on a blue mat. I'm going to have instead these counters with values on them and ship names, and I'm going to put them on maps, paper maps of blue color. But to me, it feels like I'm going to get more value out of even just this set than, I bought a Spanish fleet kind of thing, right? I don't know. Anyway, I feel like the usefulness of me talking right now is starting to dissipate here because I'm just repeating myself. Um, but I think this is an interesting thing to talk about, right? As commentary on the hobby, I think it's an interesting thing to talk about, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on the subject. If you like boxed war games and you dislike miniature war games, and can articulate why, or if you agree with my sort of opinion on the matter, you can put that down below. Or if you're the opposite and you really don't like boxed war games, but you like miniatures and you can articulate why, I'd be interested to hear that. And if you like both, it'd be interesting to hear what people think about it. Because you can always augment these hex and counter games with miniatures, I guess, if you wanted to, as long as it doesn't disrupt play. If it's like a physical thing, having those miniatures there and looking cool, if that's a really big element of it for people, I mean, I guess I can get that. But I can use my imagination because I played D&D, and sometimes I've played D&D without miniatures, and I just had to imagine it, theater of the mind, that kind of stuff. I don't know. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Just something I wanted to put together since I don't have time to do a whole lot more. Let me know what you think, and we'll look to catch up on some of the other game stuff that we're doing. I've got some more games coming in the mail soon, so I want to start thinking about what I want to play when I'm done with the Dark Valley, though I suspect we'll be playing the Dark Valley for a long time to come yet. So yeah, we'll see what happens. Take care, guys, and keep on gaming. We'll see you next time.